Oh man, I didn't realize that we had people in the chat already. Sorry about that. I was waiting on working out the last little bit of information with the guys who's running the show. So let me go back through the chat here, say some hellos. Welcome everybody who's joining us for the virtual craft festival. Let's see. Welcome back, Scott and Harold and Highland Boxes. All right, we got quite a few folks in here. Thank you all for coming. Let's see. Is it time for me to start? Looks like it might be. I'll give it just a minute or two to make sure Franco's done. All right. Yep, looks like he's done. Okay, so I guess it's me. All right, so I'm doing this solo, so I'm going to try to watch the chat and see when you guys put questions up so I can answer them as I go. I'm going to try to do one of these square turn boxes. You may have seen me do it before, but you know, I'm hoping that there's some new folks on here who haven't seen it done before. And I think it's kind of cool, so maybe those who have seen it before already won't mind seeing it again. Let's see. Okay, so anyway, we're going to turn this square lidded box. This is a little bit of off-axis turning, so we're going to have to turn it from 5 different points to get this nice square shape. So I found that it's a little easier to start with a rounded blank, so I'm going to do that here. I've already rounded it out to make just to speed things along, and I'm going to show you how to lay out the I'm going to show you how to lay out the marks and get your access points in the right place. So since we don't have a whole lot of time, I'm just going to jump right into it. See, there's a whole lot going on in the chat, so let's see. Making sure I'm not missing anything. All right, so let's switch the cameras over a little bit. Okay. Need to grab a pencil. All right, so to do this, you're going to need a compass of some kind. All right, so what I have marked here is I have when the blank was still square, I went ahead and marked the center lines indicated by these lines right here. Make sure those are right. Yeah, indicated by these lines right here. And you want to do that while it's still square because it'll be a lot easier to do it at that point. I've also gone ahead and turned the tenons on each end of this blank. That's going to help a little bit as well. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take our compass and we're going to draw a circle. It doesn't really matter how big this circle is that's going to help us to register our anchor points. It doesn't really matter how big it is. You just don't want it to be too close to the edge of your workpiece. In this case, too close to the edge of the tenon, because you don't want it to break off when you apply pressure between the points. So we're just gonna draw a little circle here, like I said, far enough in that we're not gonna break off the edge of our tenon there. And we're gonna do that on both sides. Okay. And now that we've done that, take a scratch awl or whatever you want to call it. All right, and then what we want to do is, let's see, looking at all these marks. I got some extra marks on here. Ignore those. But what you want to do is where these cross hatch marks hit that circle, you want to take your scratch awl and make an indentation. And what this is for is so that you can register easier. Make sure that you have a more positive registration when you're mounting it between points, because there's not always a lot of room to work. There's not always a lot of room when you're setting these up to see where exactly the points are falling. So let's take a look at that. You're going to do that on both sides. Now I'm not with only an hour, and this is a little bit of a complicated project. I'm not really so focused, not hyper focused on the finished quality of this piece. It's really, I just really want to get the information out there so you guys can see how it's done. So now that we have our marks, we have our locations marked out, then we can go ahead and mount this between centers. This is going to be turning off axis. Okay, so it's going to be super important that you check the positioning. I'm going to need a lamp to see this. It's going to be super important as you go to make sure, as you go from axis point to axis point, that you make sure that your tool rest isn't going to make contact with your piece as you're turning it. See, there we go. Might be easier to line it up this way. Yep, there we go. All right, and you want to make sure you get that lined up and registered in those indentations that you made earlier. All right, you want enough pressure to hold it, but not enough to break off your tenon. Okay. We want to bring our tool rest up, and this right here is what I'm talking about. You want to make sure, because this is turning so far off center, you don't want to be hitting your tool rest as you're doing this. So, and you want to check that every time you change the position. Let's see, looking over here real quick, try not to let the chat get too far ahead of me. All right, so, oh, I forgot something. Glad I remembered that. Okay, so the thing I forgot, I haven't done this in a little while, so I tried to do it beforehand and to make sure I didn't forget anything, but that didn't really play out. So, but anyway, What we want to do now is we want to make some guides to let us know when we've cut enough material away, because otherwise you could chase this down to nothing. So what you want to do is you want to put the point of your compass. See, I don't know if I can get that closer. Okay. All right. You want to put the point of the compass inside that one of those marks that you made, and you want to draw an arc on the opposite side, relatively close to the edge. So I usually make 2 marks to make sure I have it set properly, because what I need is I need 2 of these large arcs to meet in the corner. That's actually what gives you the square shape. It's not that you're turning it square. You're making it, you're not really turning the shape square. It's just you're turning 4 very large arcs, and where those arcs meet, they form basically a corner. So with that one, right, when I move to the next one, I can see right there that they're not going to really connect. See? They're not really going to connect. So I know I'm drawing that just a little big. So I'll come back to this one. I'll draw it just a little bit smaller. Okay. Oops. And then I'm going to go around and I'm going to do all the other ones. So you can see right there that it crosses. It crosses the previous one. That's what you want. Okay. Now, if you did it right, you wouldn't have all those extra marks, but whatever. So we're going to do that on this side as well. It'll be a little easier to see what I'm talking about over here because I don't have all the extra marks. Okay, so here's what I'm talking about. There we go. Got that in focus. So you can see that these the arcs are intersecting each other, and that's what's going to make our corners, and that's what's going to allow us to know when to stop cutting, know when we've arrived at the shape we want. So let's go ahead and get this mounted back up, and we can get going. Okay. All right, so again, and this bears mentioning as many times as I can, that you want to be making sure that you're checking to make sure that you're clearing the rest. That's crazy important, because if it comes around and hits that rest, it's going to break out your mount points, and you won't be able to use that blank. So I'm going to use a bowl gouge. Let's see. Let me take a few things off the lathe because I don't want them to be vibrating off of there, because this thing is not centered, or not, this thing is not balanced at all. So what we're going to do is, when we're making these cuts, I'm going to go ahead and cut a flat across the front of this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to watch from this side of the blank. I'm going to watch the horizon line to tell me how good of a job I'm doing at cutting the shape I want. And what I really want is a straight line across the back. It's a little funky because it's a ghost image, because the blank is actually bigger than the area you're cutting. But just keep an eye on the back. You'll be able to easily see where you're cutting and where you're not. Let's pick this up a little bit. First couple of passes could be a little dicey. Let's see. You want to keep the tool anchored to the rest, because the fact that you're cutting air, it's going to want to bounce around on you. And especially if you're using a MIDI lathe, it may be bouncing all over the place as you're making your cuts. So I'm doing pretty good on this side. Looks like I need to take a little bit more off that side, and I need to address this this cut here, because that is not looking great. So. Okay. See where we're at. it doesn't take a whole lot of cutting to get down to your cut line. So I think that's pretty close. All right. So then once you have that flat, then you can go ahead and move to the next one. Let's see. Let's see. Jeff S. asked if he missed it. Yes, it is a step center that I'm using. And I'm actually using a very small one from Nova. It's a 1/2 inch on this side. And this is a Robert Sorby modular rest. It is important that you have smaller ones because the larger 7/8 ones, depending on the size of the piece of wood you're working on, you may have difficulties getting it to sit so close to the edge without breaking it out. But it is super important that you use a step center, because the step center has a ring of teeth around the outside, not just a point. So you're doing an ingrain turning, you're doing a spindle turning with this, and what you don't want, I skipped one. What you don't want is you don't want to be driving 2 points into the work from either end, because you could run the risk of splitting it. So you don't want to use a 60-degree center or anything like that. You want to use some kind of step center or something that has a ring of teeth. Like this one doesn't have teeth, but it does have that cutting ring around the outside, and that's why this one is suitable for this task. All right, let's try this again. I skipped the side. That's not a good idea because you really want to watch the corners that you're forming as you go around. And the best way to do that is to work with adjacent sides. So if you work with this one, you want to go to the next side, then the next side, not skip any. It doesn't matter which way. I could have went the other way. That doesn't matter, but I set it up to go all the way across to the other side of the piece. You don't want to do that. Let's see. Right now I'm running at about 1200 RPMs. The faster you turn, the better cut you get. It doesn't take as long as you think it does to remove that material. Let me switch the cameras and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So let me zoom in a bit. Okay. So if you look at this, I've just been turning that for just a few minutes, and you can already see that I'm pretty close to the line. And I'm getting actually a pretty rough cut, so I'm going to go ahead and switch to more of a shearing cut and go ahead and start to clean that up while I make these last few passes. And I also noticed that I can move this I can wiggle this just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten this up. And with all that vibration, you can have it loosen up between the points. So you want to make sure you check that, because that'll affect the way your corners meet. Oops. So now I'm going to rotate the tool over. I'm going to take a shearing cut to work on getting a better surface. For those of you who use carbide tools, I did make one of these using carbide tools, so you can do this. Even with carbide tools, you just want to take light cuts. Like I said, you watch the horizon line to gauge your progress on how straight you're cutting your sides. And that's looking pretty good. Yep, that looks pretty good. I got a nice straight seam here, so I'm going to move on. Let's see. All right, so now I'm gonna go. I did that one. Let's see which one is it. I did this one, and now I had set up to do this one before, but I'm gonna go ahead and do it now, because that's the next adjacent side. I'm pretty sure. Wait a minute, make sure. Sometimes I get lost with these things. So that's that one, this one's the next one. Okay. Okay. All right. And another thing too, make sure you lock down the quill advance on your lathe, because there is a lot of vibration going on here. What in the hell? Okay, hold on a sec. Let me try something. I just had my lathe replaced, and I don't know. Right now, it's kind of acting up again. All right. So we're back in business. So the parts that I'm doing now are really just wash and rinse and repeat, because you just got to keep cutting it. But while I'm doing that, I want to talk about why it is that I cut the tenons on both ends first and made the marks in the tenons. Because if you've seen any of the videos I made previously about this, I didn't do that. And the reason why is because if you want to get your the inlay or the recess for the lid lined up perfectly, sometimes you may need to make little adjustments after the fact. And the only way to really do that, the only way to really do that is to be able to remount it between centers. So once I get all this done, then when we go back to mark out where the inlay and the lid or the lid's gonna go, then you can go back and you can adjust. Like you can take off a little more here, a little more there, whatever you need to do to get it to be centered. And that's really useful, particularly when you're doing this for the first few times you do it. And that's why I made that change. Okay. See where we're at now. Alright, so basically I just keep stopping the lathe to check and see where I am as far as the material removed. It looks like the previous side I removed a little bit more than I meant to. So what I'll end up having to do is once I get done with the last side, I'll go back and look at the end, and if I need to, I'll just make adjustments by taking off more material on the other sides that have the ones that I didn't take off too much. So really, you don't really have to worry about any of that too much, because there's opportunities to make corrections as you go. Let's see. All right, that's our last side there. All right, let me check it. Also checking the time. Okay, we're almost there. I need to take off just a little bit more, and I'll be down to where I need to be. And then we can start looking at whether this is going to be, whether our inlay is going to be centered. Now, something else too about that, about centering the inlay, is I had a chat with a friend, and we were talking about off-axis type things, and talking about how using off-axis turnings to create things that are not exactly symmetric is kind of the point. And he asked me why it was that I was so obsessed with having the lid or the inlay or whatever I decide to do on the top perfectly centered. And that was a good point. So when you're making these, you really don't have to do that. I mean, you could make that part of your part of the aesthetic or the design of your piece is the fact that the center is not the lid and the inlay are not centered. You know, just something to think about. All the ones I've made so far, I've tried really hard to get it to be centered, but like my friend said, you know, it is off axis, so you know, there's nothing really wrong with it being, you know, not perfectly centered. So now I'm just taking a look at the end here, and looking at the distance between here and the shoulder, making sure it's the same, which it's not. So this one's pretty small, this one's a little bigger, and this one's pretty small. So it looks like these two sides here I need to take off just a little bit more. So I'm going to mount that. And basically, when you remount it, the side you want to cut, you want to mount the piece on the opposite, the hole on the opposite side. So this hole right here correlates to that arc. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to take a little bit off, and then I'm going to address that other side, and then we're going to move on to the next step. As I was scrolling back in the comments also, I noticed that there was a little bit of conversation about people with a smaller lathe, like a MIDI lathe, being concerned that with the vibration they wouldn't be able to do it. That's not necessarily true. It just means that you'd have to turn at a slower speed to keep your lathe from walking away from you. But it's definitely doable. So don't let that stop you. Don't let that stop you from trying. All right, so I'm feeling better about that. Feeling good about that. So this side right here, I want to take off just a hair, and then, yeah, then we'll go forward. Yeah, Radar the Wood Turner says his camera stand is a guitar stand with a mop handle. Mine's not far from that. It's a mic stand with a bicycle mount for a GoPro strapped to the base of it, because the post isn't big enough, and but it works just fine. Let's see. All right, so take off a little bit here. Trying to maintain a straight line on the horizon there. See what we got. All right. This thing's going to need a lot of sanding. All right. Okay, so now we have our shape here. Let's see, virtual camera. All right, we have our shape. We have our square shape now. See if I can get this held up right for the camera. All right. And so now this block is really long, and I put tenons on both sides. So what I can actually do with it is I can cut it in half, and I can make 2 boxes. So if you wanted to make a set, what you could do is you could make your blank long enough to get both boxes out of it, and then you could part it off. So you could have a box, you know, you could have one 3 inches and one 2 inches, or however you want to do it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and separate these 2 halves and show you how to move on. Again, I'm not really, the goal today is not to turn out like a pristine piece. It's mostly just to get you guys to see the process, because I would normally take more time with this, but you know, we got an hour to get this done, and I'd rather get it done and get a product, get it done to the end so that you guys can see how the whole process goes. So I'm just going to pick an arbitrary place to separate these 2. That feels good right there. And when you're parting like this, you want to make sure that you don't try to part all the way through in one single cut. You want to move from side to side to make a little room for the tool to work so that it doesn't bind up in there and pull it out of your hands. And then you get down. I normally take it down to a pretty small diameter. And the fact that I'm going to hollow that material away anyway, I just go ahead and twist it loose once I get it down to the size, get it down to a small size like that. So I just twist it loose. Okay. All right. So now, moving to the next thing, we're going to take the step center out of the chuck and get our piece mounted up. Okay. Let me get some of these tools off the lathe bed so I can work. Okay. It's my lathe piece. All right, and the first thing I want to do is face off this top area. So in the case where I made this blank just about the right size, where I didn't part off half of it, okay? One of the things that can happen is, let's see, I had another one I was working on. So you see these little marks right here from the step center, all right? So one of the things that can happen is if you don't clear this face off and make sure you've gotten rid of all those things, they can show up in your final piece. So that's the first order of business. We got to face this end off and get that nice and pristine before we do anything else, because we want to make sure that that top surface is going to look good. That's our show surface. So when you make these cuts, because you're cutting a square and you have airspace, so you'll cut these points, right? But in between, there's going to be some airspace. So when you go into the cut, you want to be deliberate about it. And I like to use a 3/8 inch spindle gouge, all right? And basically, I line the, if I want a straight cut with it, I line the bevel up so that it'll travel straight across the face. This is actually a little low. All right? I line the bevel up so it'll travel straight across the face and end up at the center, okay? And I usually do this pretty quick. Well, with a pretty high speed. So I'll bump this up a little bit. And this will give you a really clean cut. Let's see here. So when you go in, you want to go cut that shoulder. Let's see. Come around a little bit more. Cut that shoulder. And then just bring it all the way in. Referencing off the bevel. Give you a nice, really clean cut. I got a couple of ridges in there. I'm going to do it one more time and get rid of that. Okay. See, and that'll give you a nice clean surface there. All right, and nice crisp corners, which is what you want. So at this point, you have to decide what you want the top of this box to look like. So if you look at this one pretty close, if you look at this one closely, you'll see that I've actually domed that top bit just a little bit. So you could do that. You could introduce a little bit of a dome to the top, or you could leave it square. Like this one's nice and flat and square. But if I wanted to add a little bit of a curve, I just start out here, and instead of coming straight across, I just cut it in a little bit of a curve type shape. So, all right. So I'm going to leave this one square. And the next thing we need to do is we need to get a Forstner bit, and we need to cut a recess for our. We need to cut a recess for the lid. So let's move a few things around and get that done. All right. First thing I'm gonna do is measure my measure the face of this thing, see what kind of room I got. So if I went with 2 inches, that would go almost to the edge. So I think I'm gonna try like maybe 1 7/8. Yeah, 1 7/8. Something else too is when you make these, right? It looks a lot better to have these areas on the outside as small as possible. In this case, I did an inlay, so the inlay is what actually went close to the edge. But for this piece, I'm going to just do a lid. So we're going to take the lid pretty close to the edge there. So let me grab a Forstner bit and a drill chuck, and we will get that done. Let's see. Looks like I don't have a 1 7/8. So I guess we'll do 1 5/8. Yeah. Yeah. So all I have is a 1 5/8. And that's fine. So we're going to use a drill chuck and go ahead and mount this in there. And then we'll be able to bore out the hole for the lid. And we'll just use a spindle gouge to widen it out to the size we want. Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm going to turn the speed down a bit, probably around 800 RPM. And this hole doesn't need to be very deep because this hole is going to, well, actually, it really doesn't matter how deep this hole is. If you have trouble, if you have difficulties hollowing out something like this with straight sides, you could bore all the way down to your finished depth. But I'm going to show you how to use a spindle gouge to do the hollowing, so we don't need to make this very deep. Hang on, maybe we need to tighten that up a little bit more. All right. Okay. So now we have that hole going. So now, that's not close enough to the outside for my taste, so I'm going to use a square scraper, and I'm going to enlarge that. So this is a scraper that I made from an old tool, and basically what I did is I made sure that the end of it was 90 degrees, and then on the side, I went ahead and put an 80-degree bevel on the side, down a good portion of it, so that I can use it to actually clean up the sides of boxes just like this. So this being a scraper, I want to set the tool just, I want to set this tool just above center, and then trail it down by lifting the handle up a little bit to cut. So we're going to go ahead and widen this out a bit and get the speed up. Nah, got that in the wrong place. Just a little bit lower. Okay, so let's take a look at what we got here. All right, I think that'll work. So now I'm going to go ahead and hollow out the rest of it using a spindle gouge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up to cut on center. Set this up so it's cutting on center, and I'm going to actually use the top edge of this wing right here to remove the majority of the material. So I'm going to put, I got my, to steady the tool, I'm going to hold it, let's see, I'm going to hold it with the bulge of the handle in my palm. I realize that this is a custom handle, so your handle might not be like that, but most handles have a bulge right there. So I'm going to hold it right there, and I'm going to line it up with the length of my arm for support, and then I'm going to tuck it into my body, and I'm going to make sure that I have a good hold on it, and then I'm going to just cut off the top edge of that wing, and I can go in and hollow this out quick and easy. Ordinarily, I'd lean further over the lathe while I'm doing this, but then I'd block the entire view of what I'm doing. So and this actually produces a pretty fine finish on the inside of your piece as well. So let's go ahead and finish this up. I keep turning it off to make sure that I don't get rid of the ledge right here for my lid to sit on. And when you're making this cut, if it's making a lot of noise and chattering a lot, it's probably just because you're taking too heavy of a cut. So if you back off and take off a little bit less, it'll take out some of the noise and vibration. All right, we're almost there. And you can do this a couple of different ways. You can make the inside of this so that it has straight sides and a square bottom if you want. Or you can use a tool like this, and you can make it so that it has a round bottom, a rounded bottom. Really, the choice is up to you. This time around, I'm going to go with a rounded bottom. All right, so a lot of times when I'm using this technique, I end up with a little divot at the bottom. So the last few passes, I just make really light ones, just to clean up that bottom bit and make sure that the bottom is nice and smooth. So pretty much where I want to be. Just got a little nub right there to get rid of. Once I get rid of that, around. All right. All right. Once you get the hang of that cut, you'll be able to do that, and you won't really have to do much sanding afterwards. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my square scraper, and I'm going to clean up this edge. This is the one tool I forgot to sharpen, touch up a little bit before this demo. So it ain't really cutting exactly the way I would like it to. Okay. So we want this, when we're cutting this recess here for our lid, you want that to be as straight as possible. The straighter it is, the better your lid's going to fit. Okay. All right. So we got that done. So the next thing we need to do is make our lid. So you don't have to have two chucks. I always do it with two chucks. I pull one chuck out and put the lid in the other one. But you could just as easily pull this out. See where we're at on time. Basically, I'm going to use this block right here. Let's see if it's big enough. If it's not, then I am going to use another chuck. Yep. Gonna use another chuck, at least to get it started. Now, if you didn't have access to another chuck that had bigger jaws for this, what you could actually do is just go ahead and mark center on both sides, and you could turn it between centers to get it down to a size that'll fit in the chuck, or to put a tenon on it. But for the sake of saving time, I'm just going to mount it in a different chuck. Haven't looked at the chat for a bit, so let's see. Yep. I just took a quick look. If you had a question in there, if you post it again in the next couple seconds, I'm going to look back over there and I'll be able to see it. But I wasn't able to pick up anything out of my quick scan there. Let's see here. All right. So now, what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to go ahead and use some calipers and figure out how big this opening is, and then I'm going to turn a tenon down here so that I can start to fit my lid. So I use these in the shop all the time. I don't use them for measuring. So the screen on this one's actually broken. I use it for, I guess I do use them for measuring, but it's relative measuring. I don't set it for a certain size and use it. I just set it to that size. So I know that size is exactly right. So then I'll use the other end of it to check my progress on my tenon. Well, it's a tenon now, but when we're done with it, it's going to be the part of the lid that fits down into the box. So let's go ahead and start sizing this down. Now, so I'm going to start off by just knocking the corners off, and I just keep a loose eye on what's going on there. So I get down to the size I need. Okay. As I get closer to where I want to go, I'll take smaller bites. Like I'm getting pretty close now. So what I'll do is, instead of taking this tenon here, which is probably 3/8 of an inch or so, I'm going to take I'm going to cut a very small shoulder there, and then check with the calipers. So that's just a little bit too small. It's really almost exactly the right size, but I really want it a little bigger because I need a little bit of friction on the fit. So I'm going to leave that shoulder there because I now know that that's too far. And I also know that I'm just a little bit off. So I'm going to cut it down just close. And then I'm going to check it again. It's also worth noting that the calipers can be off from time to time, so it's also a really good idea to check your actual piece, your actual work piece. And that first fit was really nice. I don't know if you can hear that, but it has a little pop when you pull it off. But I do need it just a little bit bigger than that. So now that I need to get that little bit, I need to get that just that little bit more of a fit. So instead of trying to cut it this way, the way I have been, what I'll do is I'll come in, cut down just a little bit, and then slide and cut sideways with the shoulder of the tool. It just gives you a little bit more control. Alright, so that's going to work. Just need to take off just a little bit in the back. Alright, and then I can take off the bit that was the wrong size. Okay. Let's make sure it fits good. And then I can go ahead. Oh, it's a little too big still. Then I can dress up the inside, because it's the only time you'll be able to do that. Okay, that's a little loose still. So what I could do is I could use a paper towel to take up that extra space. But if you're going to do that, you have to remember that when you cut your lid, if you want it to fit flush, you have to account for that extra space. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and, yeah, I think I'm just going to run with it. So now that I have that, I'm going to extend that back just a little bit. And then I'll remount the box. Okay. All right. And then I'm going to part this off. Again, don't try to do it all in one pass. You're going to alternate, make room. Okay. Oops. All right, let's take this one off. Go back to this one and remount our piece here. All right, let's see how we're doing. Yep, that looks good. Tighten it up. Okay, so then we want to mount. I forgot to take care of the inside. Let me do that right now. See where we're at on time. Running out. Let's see. Where'd that other truck go? Oh, that's not going to hold. So I'm mounting this back up because you want to try to take care of the inside of the lid now, because that's the best time to do it. Yeah, it didn't go back in there exactly right, but we'll make do. So I just want to clean up this face a bit. Okay, and then just put a little bit of a hollow really quickly. Okay. I think I'm down to 8 minutes. Let's see if I can finish this up in time. Let's see here. So now that we have the lid back in there, just going to shape it. Okay. You're going to have you're going to want to have tailstock support for this, at least part of it. Okay. I'm going to use the same spindle gouge to give this a little bit of shape. So we're actually using our lid kind of like a jam chuck in this way. Okay. Okay. Ooh, hang on. Being a little too aggressive. I didn't have that seated all the way in there, evidently. Let's see. Okay. I can also see that the recess was a little bit deeper, which is not a big deal. I'm just going to come back and reestablish that top cut. Remove that extra material, and now we're back where we need to be. And then I'll just form a little bit of a handle. All right. Could have cut a little bit more of that off of there. But anyway. Oops. All right, I ain't gonna be able to do that. Okay, so let's try a different. I don't know if I have time. I got 5 minutes. I'm gonna go for the gusto. Okay, so I'm gonna use a live center with a smaller point so I can get closer to it. There we go. I don't want to put too much pressure there because I don't want to dig a hole. I just want to keep it from coming out of there. And then I'm just gonna real gently cut this top as much as I can, so as much of the top of it is as nice as possible. Okay, there's gonna be a little divot there, but that's okay. All right, pull that back, pull this off, and then we're gonna part this off of there, and we're gonna call it done. Sorry about bumping into the camera. Got to make compromises when you're on out of time. All right, so let's see where we at. Depth-wise, we're going to use this to measure how deep we got to go, how deep we hollowed it to. Use my compass here, make a little mark. Parting tool. Let's see, where is it? Right there. Okay. So when I'm using this, I want to make sure I get a nice clean corner. Or as clean as I can get it. See here. All right. Got a little bit of blowout there, but nothing too bad. That wasn't great. Grab my skew, take the nub off. Okay. All right, so at 657, right? A little less than ideal, but let's see here. A little less than ideal. I had to make some sacrifices to get it done in an hour, but there you go. You have a square box, square turn box with a lid, with a nice fitting lid, decorated bottom. The next thing I would have done if I'd had time is I would have created a second jam chuck, and I would have decorated the bottom. I would have cleaned up the bottom edge. So let's see. I don't know if there's any questions, but I think I'm right up against time right now. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know it was a bit rushed. I probably bit off a little more than I could chew picking this for a project in an hour, but there you go. And I know, like I had mentioned before, that somebody was talking about the fact that they were concerned about trying this with a MIDI lathe. Like I said, just turn the speed down a bit, and you'll be just fine doing this. So I definitely encourage each of you to try it now that you know how it's done. And, you know, like always, dread not and make something. Peace. I don't know how I'm supposed to end this thing. I don't know. Oh, by the way, let's see. Man, let me see if I can look real quick and see who's up next, so I can plug them a little bit. So up next we got Jake Thompson. So make sure you go over and check out his, go out and check his presentation. I'm sure he's got some awesome resin awesomeness for you. So anyway, thanks everybody who came out to check out this thing, and enjoy the rest of your craft fair.